session we discussed at the beginning there, at the UN General Assembly. It starts at 3 o'clock today. There is no cost to you. You can be a part of that, which is actually, as Sarah was saying at the beginning, quite a thing and something that probably we wouldn't have been able to do pre-COVID. So we've got to take the small wins, haven't we? Perhaps not so small. Let's talk now to Shobna Gulati, an actor best known for roles in Coronation Street and in Dinner Ladies, of course. She's written a memoir called Remember Me, Discovering My Mother as She Lost Her Memory. And Shobna joins us from home. Good morning to you, Shobna.
Good morning.
And I think it's worth saying, actually, that, of course, the events of the last few months have affected everybody. And you basically lost your job in mid-March.
Yeah, I lost my job in mid-March and also contracted COVID-19 and found myself terribly isolated. And in that place of isolation and utter despair, I thought about the loss of my mother. I lost my mother in November of last year, and I thought to myself, gosh, I felt really connected to her. So I began the journey of writing the book. I'd already started writing some elements of it because while I was looking after her, one of the things I did as a carer was sort of try and ignite her imagination. And she would recollect stories from her past and I would note them down. And what fascinated me about that time was the memories that she curated. I mean, it was almost as if she picked them and told me about them.
Well, she had led a most extraordinary life. I mean, oddly enough, the thing that surprised me most, and I suppose this illustrates my ignorance, she was born in Southport.
Yeah, she was born in Southport during the war. My grandparents had come over. My grandfather was one of the first officers after the British left. In the railways, he was an electrical engineer. So he was based up near Crewe, where the big exchange is, and Mum was born in Southport.
I don't know why poor old Southport. It's not funny. I've spent many a happy day there.
I know her ashes are also scattered in Southport off the end of the pier. She wanted that specifically. I mean, it's interesting. The book really charts my mum's sense of memory and identity, and she was British.
Yes.
And that's where she started and where she wanted to have her final journey.
Yeah, she was also a big fan of the soaps. I mean, she devoured them all, didn't she?
Yeah, she did. My father, when they arrived at Coronation Street, had just started. So that was 60 odd years ago. And even though obviously they spoke English, absolutely did speak English. My dad said to her, they have a funny way up north. Watch this program. It's really interesting. You'll get to know, your neighbours. And yeah, she was hooked from day one. She really loved, that sort of. There's a bathos and pathos in Coronation Street. So she really loved that.
Yeah. Well, of course, she must have been beside herself when you got a part in the soap.
Yeah, yes, she was. I mean, alongside all her favourite characters. She couldn't quite get over it, and she'd never sort of say, I love your character. She'd always say that she loved a particular person. The thing is that what was really lovely about being on Coronation Street, when I had the children on the soap opera,
yeah,
named one of them after my mum.
Right.
And all those years later, I'd find myself sitting watching Coronation Street with Mum when with her dementia. And Arsha, my screen daughter, would pop up on screen, and she would be reminded of herself. And I know that sounds really strange, but when you are caring for somebody who has dementia, you have to find sort of very creative ways of dealing with yourself in that situation and dealing with those people who are really close to you.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you, if you don't mind. Just simply advice from you about being with somebody with dementia, because there'll be lots of our listeners who are doing exactly that right now. How do you talk to them? How do you make the most of their memories?
Well, first of all, you have to accept the kind of carer you are. And that's the first thing, really. We can't be everything to everybody, so there's an acceptance that has to take place within yourself, because it's a really, really, really complicated thing. For me, as an actor, I started using my imagination, and I love to cook, so I filled the house with delicious smells, in a bid to encourage her to eat and to sort of get her memory back to those smells that she really, once used to love. I'd ad lib, I'd try and, when she'd forgotten something, I'd try and say, I didn't want to say, but I already told you. Because, care, you've got to care for that loved one and still retain their dignity. So I didn't, if somebody kept telling me, oh, I've already told you, I thought to myself, well, that would be really, really wary. So I'd come up with some madcap story. I mean, it was really thinking on your feet like improv, as an actor. And, I made jokes. I tried to stimulate her love. Her portal to life was the television. So, the television, from adverts through to, watching the same program over and over again. We'd find something within the program and, she'd recall from there. And you'd go on that journey with her. And that's why I wanted to share that with you. There's a lot of sadness in this as you watch your loved one, incrementally lose their memory and sense of themselves. But at the same time, you can go with them on that journey.
Well, you can, Shobna, if you're able, but did you ever feel that you, frankly, were losing yourself in all this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is my first-hand experience of looking after her and the impact that had on my work, on my relationships, on our family, and how, so destructive it was. But at the same time, now, I suppose I've worked through a lot of that, and I tried to work through that whilst I was with my mum, because it obviously kept cropping up, and you have to find a way of, caring for yourself, because if you don't care for yourself, you are going to be in trouble. So I would take time to, reach out for support and talk to your friends. I mean, you need it. Because you can feel almost trapped in it too. It's a really hard decision to make to care for somebody who has this illness, and it's not to be taken lightly. But you need the support, and I'd reach out. There is support available, and try and find some time. My sister used to make sure she went for a walk, for example. It's really hard to sort of make those choices, because you think you're going to miss something, or you think you're going to, something will happen. But, the truth of the matter is that you have to. You just have to, otherwise you'll never used to it.
You say you had COVID. How are you now?
I'm not sure really. Sometimes I feel sick and exhausted, and I don't know where that comes from. Well, it's obviously something to do with the remnants of it. It's not it was a really, really difficult disease to have. I lost my sense of smell and taste, and that reminded me of the times that I was with my mum when, she'd have a respiratory infection and she couldn't actually quite tell us that, she wasn't interested in the food that you'd cooked, and she couldn't find comfort in that. And I kind of now realise what she might have been going through, her sense of taste or smell might have been affected. And of course there's no communicating that, because, essentially she'll be in a different place to you. It was really, really interesting, and that's why I wrote the book. It was what memory returned to her when she wasn't concentrating on the day-to-day presence.
Well, what really comes through the piece is, the intricacies of family life, to put it mildly, and the fact that your mum, when you were a third child and you were a girl, and your mum had also had a tough time as a young girl too.
Yes, I think, we all live with patriarchy, don't we?
Don't start me, Shobna.
And I think that, with it, from given her cultural background, the onus was on her to produce a son. And, when I arrived, I was the third girl. Not that she, obviously she did which is beta. And now they've kind of become combined, grammatically. It doesn't really matter whether you're a beta or a beta. But for Mum, when she called me beta towards the end, I just thought, well, that's lovely. Finally, I have, no gender, and I'm there for her, and she realises that.
I thought the book was lovely, actually, and I hope you're proud of what you did for your mum. I'm sure you are. But I hear it in your voice. You've had a really tough time, haven't you?
Yeah, it has been.
Yeah.
It has been extremely difficult. I think isolation for all of us is difficult. Isolation when you're caring for somebody in these times of coronavirus, it must be extremely difficult. And I my heart reaches out to everybody who is in that situation. I just want them to know that, you've got to keep a hold of yourself and find those, those happy moments in the sad, because there are, and that will bring you a great deal of comfort. And also, please rely on your friends. I mean, please do.
Yeah, well, ask as well. That's the other thing.
But you should ask, because they are there.
Yes, yeah, but sometimes they need to be. Well, they need to know that you need them. It's as simple
Yes,
as that.
they definitely need to know that you need them.
Shobna, thank you so much for being on, and take care of yourself. Shobna Gulati, Remember Me, Discovering My Mother as She Lost Her Memory is the title of Shobna's book. Now, tomorrow on the programme, we're launching, I'm delighted to say, the Power List for 2020. I'm going to be revealing the theme of the list and introducing two of our judges, as well as asking for your ideas of women you think should be considered. Now, you might well be new to the programme. I should say the first Power List was back in 2013. Since then, we've celebrated inspiring women who've really made a difference to the way we live our lives. So you can look back to see who made it to previous Power Lists by going to the ever-present and incredibly useful Women's Hour website, bbc.co.uk/Women's Hour. That's where you'll find all that. Schools are back, and I'm just wondering how it's been for you in the playground. Have you ever felt the cold shoulder at the school gate? Tanith Carey is a journalist and parenting author, and Dr. Rachel Allen is a chartered counselling psychologist. And I said at the beginning of the programme, we've had some interesting comments from listeners. Tanith, we may like to pretend this stuff doesn't go on, but actually, judging by the reaction from our audience, it still is very much a part of some people's lives.
Absolutely. I mean, when we step into that school playground with our child, we feel it's not only our child going back to school, it's also us. And it is a very tense situation. I think it is worthwhile recognising how challenging it could be. I think because there's a lot of insecurity, a lot of judgmentalism around parenting, we want to know that we're doing it right. So that I think even when we step into the playground, we can often bring baggage from our own childhood, and also feel quite a lot of paranoia about what other people think about our parenting styles.
Right, okay. Well, Dr. Rachel Allen, is it because we're carrying our own childhood baggage that this sort of thing can be so hard to navigate?
Morning, Jane. Well, the school gate is significant for exactly that reason. When we take our child to school and when we visit that school gate, as if that's not difficult enough a thing to do in its own right, we bring with us our own memories from having been at school. So any time that we may have felt excluded during our school years, any time that we may have felt, a sense of injustice or perhaps even being bullied, that comes with us. So a social situation that's already complex and already difficult, exactly as Tanith is saying there, we bring our own past with us and makes it even more challenging to navigate.
Okay, can I just bring in the listeners here? This is an anonymous email from a parent who says, my child has special needs, autism, and I feel I'm a permanent outcast in the playground. I've come to terms with it over the years. My child is now in the last year of primary school, but it does sometimes make me sad. For example, recently when the Black Lives Matter movement, which I fully support, hit the press, parents on the class WhatsApp group would crow about how inclusive we are. Unfortunately not if your child has autism. Tanith, that strikes me as being very depressing.
Yeah, I can completely understand where that mother is coming from. I mean, the fact is that many children on the spectrum also have problems with social skills, and that as a mother of a child on the spectrum, you can also
Tech experts Carrie and Louise will be here to tell us all about the tech that purports to make us fitter, happier and more productive. Whether remains to also,
one of those local recipes is about to stabilize my skin. And the main ingredient, Wonder Spice turmeric.
yeah, that's supermodel Rachel.
Have some kind of consistent social challenges. So, I mean, I think that as a society, we need to remember that there's a growth mindset, and that children really can be taught the skills to fit in better, make eye contact, say the right thing in the right circumstances, and not just give up the ghost, if you see what I mean.
No, not easy though. Another anonymous email. When I moved from town to country, nothing prepared me for the oddness of schoolgate politics. The outward hostility, cold shouldering, curiosity and mistrust towards me, a newbie, has been ill-concealed, and I'm not alone. I have also met some great individuals amongst these women, but I've never found my gang. I gave up trying a long time ago. I now call myself the ninja mum. I'm in cahoots with the lollipop lady. She tips me off when my kids appear. I dash in, grab them and go, so I don't have to stand there like Billy No-Mates. Rachel, this is having a pretty dreadful effect on this parent. But it doesn't have to be that way, does it?
Well, I think perhaps even before we get to the school gate, it's important to think a little bit groups and how groups work, because we draw so much of our identity and our sense of self and even our self-esteem, from groups. And part of that is that we gravitate towards people who reaffirm our view of ourselves. So if we feel we have something in common, or we feel that they reflect something that we want to reaffirm back to us, then we'll go towards those people. But part of how groups work, unfortunately, is that for a group to have an identity, it relies on having an out group. So for us to be us, there needs